Hey, Will here from Rat Boys Review. Today I'll be covering Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, which is a sequel to the Eiyuden Chronicle Rising, a game that I haven't played. This was a viewer request from Dorchette, who has been a longtime supporter of the channel over on Twitch. To be forthright, I will not filter my opinions regardless of who I'm reviewing for. So if you request a review, just be aware that we may not agree. Before we get into it, let's do a quick rundown of the scoring process. We take 11 properties that every good game should have and score them individually. We simply take those scores and average them together to get the final verdict. I'm flying solo on this one, and we have a lot to cover, so let's get to it. Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes is a JRPG that focuses on recruiting allies to bolster your ranks. Similar games include the Legend of Heroes series, Radiata Stories, but is ultimately a love letter to the Suikoden series. Eiyuden 100 Heroes was released on April 23rd, 2024, and is available on the PC, the PS4, the PS5, the Switch, the Xbone, and the Series X. The game was made by a new indie company, Rabbit and Bear Studios, and while not having the same name as the previous developer for Eiyuden Rising, probably has heavy ties to the original developer, including Yoshitaka Murayama, who led the dev team and created the Suikoden series, or at least 1 and 2. Eiyuden was published by 505 Games, who also brought us Ghost Runner, Control, and the Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. The typical time to beat is between 50 to 60 hours and costs between $50 to $80 on Steam, depending on what edition you go with the $80 version including a season pass. Our story begins in a corner of Alron, a tapestry of nations with diverse cultures and values. By dint of sword and by a magical way, objects known as rune lenses. The land's history has been shaped by the alliances and aggressions of the humans, beastmen, elves, and desert people who live there. The Galdian Empire has edged out of other nations and discovered a technology that amplifies the runes lenses magic. Now, the Empire is scouring the continent for an artifact that will expand their power even further. It is on one such expedition that Sane Kessling, a young and gifted Imperial officer, and Noah, a boy from a remote village, meet each other and become friends. However, a twist of fate will soon drag them into the fires of war and force them both to re-examine everything they believe to be right and true. Pretty decent as far as Steam goes, but they left out the bulk of the game. Once the early game events play out, your real job is building an army. There's actually 3 quote-unquote main characters: Noah, Sane, and Marissa, which they left out for some reason. All 3 characters have distinct backgrounds and attitudes, but pretty much agree on all issues. Essentially just modified Paragon archetypes. The main gist of the game is, hey, we need help. In return, we'll join your army. That's about 40 hours or 66% of the game. The rest is just mini games with about 20% of story. Don't want to get into spoiler territory, so I'll move on. Your general gameplay consists of your basic JRPG turn-based fighting, running around and trying to find various things like recruitable heroes, food recipes, equipment, and playing mini-games, all while you're trying to manage your castle. That's pretty much the depth of what you'll be doing. Mechanically, there are a few things going on here. First off is combat. Fighting has an auto fight option, which is pretty helpful for the grind, and has some custom options for the auto fight, but they're pretty bare bones. You get a party of 6 fighters plus 1 support member and 3 extra slots for bench. You level up character weapons instead of buying different weapons, but accessories and armor are still your basic shop hunt thing. Managing your castle requires grinding areas for resources, but some upgrades help you with that. About 1/4 of the way through, you'll have an opportunity to unlock fast travel, which is good. There's a town trading mechanic, but is ultimately a waste of time in my opinion. And speaking of a waste of time, there's also elemental damage mechanic, but it's not worth even going into. And finally, you can customize each hero. This varies from hero to hero, and there's a clear difference of how good they are from each other. So much so that if this video gets 100 views, I will make an in-depth tier list for all the 120 heroes in this game, explaining how to get them, if it's even worth it, and comparing upgrade slots and stats. So if you're interested in that, show the support. So with 120 characters to deal with, you'd hope that at least half of them would be interesting. And they are, generally speaking. Sure, there's plenty of stinkers, but there's also enough to keep things interesting. This game is fully, well, nearly fully voiced, and to have a game like this done in that fashion is very good. This would be a very different opinion if I had to read all the dialogue in this game. And as far as the quality of the voice acting, it's very good. So good job with that. The idea of running an army in this kind of game is really cool. There's some work that needs to be done to make it more viable, but this is a good start. Hopefully, if there is another entry, they will work on that aspect. That being said, it's still not bad. The mix between the 2D and 3D thing they have going on here, or 2.5D, along with the animations and dueling sections, are not seen very often and are done pretty well in this game. There's a lot of quality of life things that could be worked on here. Selecting party members, for instance. There's no way to favorite or save your teams. Shopping is kind of a pain, and there's no way to zoom out when you're upgrading your castle. These are just inconveniences, and there's more, but when your game has a lot of menu time in it, then your menu needs to be good. And this is probably in the top 3 complaints that I have about this game. There's a few heroes that are just bad to try and recruit. Not going into spoilers too much, but there's one that you need if you're going to try and max out your castle, and he needs an item that randomly appears in the local shop. Shops refresh their items every 30 or so minutes, but it took me 10 hours for this item to appear for me. And by that time, the items that you get from him were irrelevant. And that's just one example. There's a few more just as annoying, but again, that's a different video. Unfortunately, anything that costs MP, or magic points, is generally not worth using for the first at least half of the game. It almost feels like you're being punished for using magic. Magic costs too much MP, and it doesn't reflect in the effects. On top of that, MP restoration items are hard to come by for a long time, so you have to either use an overpriced inn or go back to your headquarters. But it's not worth it if you blow all your MP in like 5 or so spells. Leanna is a character who's pretty prevalent to the story, and I hate this bitch. I hate her so much, I feel like K-Dot.
I hate the way that you walk, the way that you talk, I hate the way that you dress.
From the first line to the last line, I hate her. I find her to be absolutely insufferable. From the moment I had the ability, I benched her, but the game kept insisting she was required to be in the party. She is not necessary to ever be in the party. I hate her archetype, I hate her voice, I hate that mechanically, she's not a bad character. I hope whatever computer her files are on gets corrupted, along with her backups. I hate her so much I would think 3 times before reviving her. I hate this bitch so much that I wish that she would get the Wolverine Origins Deadpool treatment.
Stryker finally figured out how to shut you up.
She's possibly one of the most annoying characters I have ever had to deal with. My blood pressure increased every time I saw her. The battles aren't bad, but they're only like one step up from an RPG Maker game. Nothing is going to wow you here. Maybe it'll be different for others, but as someone who has put hundreds of hours in making an RPG Maker game, I just saw too many similarities from what I was having to program versus what I saw in this game. JRPGs have grind. This game can be really grindy. Me personally, if the grind is fun, I don't have an issue with it. This grind was not very fun to me. I found that the fighting and upgrades along with the rewards in the early to mid game were very lacking. That being said, some others might find it more enjoyable than I did. Another staple in JRPGs is the time sink. This game is super long if you're actually trying to recruit everyone and do castle building. That's just how these games are though. If you're settling in for a JRPG, expect there to generally be a very long time sink. I played on the basic hard mode, and I found it to be way too easy. I game overed one time in a duel, and that's because duels are kind of RNG, it seems. As far as actual regular fighting, I was close only a handful of times to be game overed, but that's just my take on it. There are other options to increase the difficulty in certain ways, but it really seems more like it would just be more of a grind to turn those options on. Things like increasing the cost of things and stuff like that. And I'm not looking to increase the grind on an already grindy game. There are 10 minigames in this game. I'm going to share my thoughts and my tricks on each one. This will include spoilers, so if you don't want to get some tips, then feel free to skip ahead. But a lot of them are annoying or boring or both, so it is what it is. There's only a couple of reasons to fish in this game. First is for cooking, which is ultimately a waste of time. The other is to get the fisherman for the town or the castle. He wants a specific fish. Makes sense, right? Only that fish is not guaranteed to spawn, and he doesn't even give you a hint or tell you where you can get the fish. But outside of the town that you talk to him in for recruitment, there's a cave, and between them is a fishing spot that has a chance to get this fish. It took me 10 times of clearing this spot out to get this fish. How do you actually fish, you might ask? Well,
Yep. Yes!
that's a 1 out of 10 minigame. Begoma. Begoma is the biggest minigame in the game. Essentially, it's just Bakugan, and for some reason it makes me physically ill to play. I don't know why it does, but it does. Anyways, you get tops in 2 ways, either by beating Begoma bosses or monsters will drop them. Basically, you just spin tops. Each top has stats, and you can enter a button mash sequence to do extra damage to the other person's top. The game is best 2 out of 3, but you have to play all 3 rounds, regardless if you win or lose the first 2. My issues, mechanically, is the damage is too RNG, seemingly anyways. You can't customize your tops at all, and there's an element chart, but it doesn't actually show up in-game. You do this for a recruit, well, technically 2 recruits, and they're both completely irrelevant whenever it comes to fighting. I didn't like this game either. It's a 3 out of 10 for me. And for a top really early on, go to the Treefolk Forest and get the bear top. And that top will carry you for a long time, at least until you get to the next tier, because there's 4 tiers of tops. Otherwise, just hold off and find them on enemy drops until you have a good collection to use and play around with. This is an in-game pay-to-win card game. This one is pretty simple. You put better cards down than your opponent and win. You battle at the same place that you buy the cards from, and you face people that you have recruited into the army. Beat 15 of them and face a new recruit that sits beside the counter. It's probably the best minigame in the game, but essentially you just need to stack your deck and win. 6 out of 10. This game is like a little bit of a rip-off of Fire Emblem Grid War. Most of these are required for the story, and no one shuts the fuck up. Most of them are rigged in one way or another. It could have been cool, but ultimately it annoyed me because I never felt like my strategy mattered. This is a 4 out of 10. It's hard to mess up. The theater is pretty cool. You select recruits for roles, and they play out automatically, and you get scored for your casting ability. You can pick anyone for any role, and can make some pretty funny situations, like having a dragon play Juliet in Romeo and Juliet. The item rewards before S ranking each play are some of the best items you can get. Now, where it fails. To get access to this theater, you need to buy a script, but that script isn't always in the shop. Hence, before whenever I was talking about having 10 hours for an item to show up, you might just get lucky, but then if you want new scripts, once it's been built, it's the same deal in shops all across the map. That's bad game design in my opinion. But the theater itself is a 5 out of 10 without taking into account how you have to get the scripts. Kinda like chocobo racing, you race and breed eggheads, or flightless birds, chickens, whatever. Rewards are useless, and you don't have a reason to do it that I can find. That being said, it's still kind of fun. A 5 out of 10. Duels are 1v1s, but with only 2 options, attack or defend. They are non-avoidable and story required. Do enough damage and survive long enough, you get to use an ability that does a scripted fighting event. What I found is just attack until you can get to the break point. Then just counter until you can finish it. It's flashy, but if you fail, you have to watch the whole thing over again. 4 out of 10. Pick 3 items. Mash the A button. Get scored. You have to do this at least 15 times. It's probably the least interactive minigame of them all, and is used to get a mediocre recruit. The 3 items that you'll need from the beginning to the end that will win you more times than not, including the final boss, is an omelet, vegetable milk soup, and coconut water. It will win you the whole thing. 1 out of 10. Not sure if you can even consider this one a minigame, but the wiki says it is. You go from town to town buying low and selling high. It is required to do for a recruit, but all they do is let you do this more. And anything that you sold previously before you're able to talk to that recruit doesn't count towards getting him. The Excel spreadsheet game was not hard, nor was it enjoyable. 1 out of 10. And as far as money goes, you might as well just farm antiques. I almost forgot even, but there's a boat race thing that you have to do. You have to do it 2 times for the story, and 1 extra time to get a recruit. It's kind of like Spyro collecting stuff, or Superman grabbing the rings, or MotoGP, stuff like that. It's not super hard or exciting, and it's not even mentioned on the wiki that it is a minigame, so I had to remember it myself. Ultimately, it's not hard. I kind of wish that they did more with it, and there's not really a strategy to it besides go forward, collect stuff, boost, win. Ultimately, it's a 4 out of 10. Maybe if there was more tracks or more reason to do it, it would have been more fun, but there's not that much really going on with it. Overall, the minigame score comes to a 3.2. This won't affect the overall game score, but is a general score saying that the minigames are pretty lackluster overall. There's not a single one that I'll be booting this game up to try and play for the fun of it. I like the 2.5D thing they have going on here. The animations are solid, character design is generally pretty good. There's some good and some bad or awkward looking enemies, and some things look like bot assets. I could be wrong about that, but that's the feel I get from some of the enemies. The imagery is also washed out in some areas, similar to what you would see in Octopath Traveler. Makes me think that it's a sold reshade package or something, though Octopath was made with Unreal and this game uses Unity. Regardless, it's a solid 7 in the visual department. The fully voiced lines are nice. Creature sounds aren't annoying, nor are any of the special moves, because sometimes you can get like a screeching sound from something or something like that. You don't have that here. The music is okay. None of them are bangers. They're not going to make it onto my playlist. But I didn't hate any of them either. They were very thematic for the atmosphere that they were promoting. The character that teleports you has to say something before and after every teleport, which is super annoying. because of how much you have to teleport in this game. Though you could argue that you don't have to, but I'm not walking around places that I can just teleport to. There's also a few annoying voices for some of the characters, but it's not a deal breaker at all. So I give it a solid 6 for audio. The actual story is pretty solid here, even though it's all about the friends you made along the way BS, but still pretty solid. What brings the story down for me is a lot of the side stories. There were a lot of storylines I cared nothing about. I understand that it's hard to make so many characters individually interesting, but also no one said you needed 120 characters. The minigame side stories were probably the weakest, specifically Begoma and cooking. I didn't really care about them at all. Fortunately, the main storyline makes up for a lot of it. It's got everything it needs to have a good story. 6 out of 10. Unfortunately, the pacing is a 4 on my end. It's tricky to pace any JRPG, but I was quite annoyed pretty much any time I had to grind for a new recruit or item. Whether it was having to hunt for resources, Begoma tops, items, or just fishing, none of it was enjoyable. Even fighting amounted to just pushing the auto battle function. If the grind was more interactive, maybe it would have been a better experience, or maybe just better rewards for having to grind. For instance, there's a hero that you need 100,000 aqua for, which is their currency, to get. Then you get them and they get immediately benched. That just should not be the case. If you're going to make me do all of this work, you need to have the proper rewards to make it worth it. Like I said before, the actual gameplay is only one step up from your average RPG Maker game. The only real stats that matter is strength and magic attack for damage. Then there's the minigames, which we've already been over and I don't really enjoy. Making teams with all the heroes was cool for a bit, but once you pick your favorites, you're not going to do much swapping. However, leveling people up to catch up to the main party is really easy to do, so there's not much grind in that department. The menus could have been more user-friendly as well, which I've mentioned before. It may seem like I'm hating too much, but if you're going to make a super long game, then it has to be good from beginning to end. The gameplay is an average 5 out of 10. There's quite a few mechanics here. Unfortunately, most of them are useless. Cooking food, pointless. Hero combos, which are special moves that require specific members in your party to do, hardly worth mentioning. Most castle upgrades, don't bother. Elements, just hit them with whatever you have. Even elemental damage buffs can be completely disregarded. The runes though, those make or break a hero. Runes essentially let you customize what your people can do. Some heroes are just trash, even some of the ones that you find in the late game, but others have unique moves that will win them a spot on the team. By the end, I still think it was a good attempt. 5.1 rats out of 10. There's honestly not much to say here. The main MC grows a bit, but doesn't change his principles or anything like that. The other two, Sane and Marissa, have things happen, but things just play out in the most predictable path. The rest of the crew is essentially just background noise. I give it a 5.9. Maybe if there was a bit of actual loss or something, it would have had a bigger impact. Or maybe just a belief crisis or something, I don't know. Like the main character at one point does have a little bit of crisis belief, but every single person just reinforced to do what he was going to do anyways. There was no real controversy in what is he going to do this? Is he going to do that? Like, it was just like, oh, we trust this guy. We know he's going to do the right thing, and we support him. I don't know if it was because I was doing so well in the game, but there was no controversy within the ranks of the army for me. It's also hard to remember everything with how long the game is. There's a diverse range of environments here. Unfortunately, they don't feel any different. just an environment skin swap. The castle for your army changes based on your upgrades, and that's cool, but that's just one town. And a lot of these upgrades can go to the wayside. The puzzle solutions generally stay, so you don't have to do them again. And as far as the whole war aspect, no one seems to really care. Like, Wayne Town is under this flag one day, and then it's under this flag the other day, and the people there just don't care. And you can still go into the town, and no one says anything to you. But still, it's a 5.9 RAS. It gets the job done. I went into this expecting the typical JRPG formula, and that's what I got. At times, it was overbearingly annoying. Other times, it was pretty solid, but I was not wowed or ecstatic most of the time. Every high was met with mediocrity. I didn't hate my time with this game, but it was a long grind with little reward for the effort. I never really got into Suikoden, but if this is what they're like, I'd be moderately disappointed because that series has been going on for a lot longer than this. And I like JRPGs. Xenogears is one of my favorite games of all time, and Cosmos from Xenosaga will always be waifu, but I digress. The phonometer set in the middle at a 5.3. Personally, I would not go through this one again. It's simply too long with too much grind. However, there's some alternate difficulty settings, like I mentioned before, to make things more challenging, maybe. I'd have to do them to find out, and I'm not going to do that. But I give it a 3 out of 10 for the replay. I feel like that the alternate options may give some people reason to go through it again, but most people are going to go through it once, recruit all the heroes, do all the mini games, upgrade the castle, and that's going to put in so much work that you're not going to want to do it again. There's a season pass that implies there will be DLC. Now, what that will equate to, I cannot say, but it might bring more to the table in this category. But I can't play DLC that I don't have. At the end of the game, I felt it was a 6.4. The ending is good. A lot of things are wrapped up, and if there's to be a sequel, I wouldn't be opposed to playing it, as long as Leanne isn't there. I feel like if the game was 20 hours shorter, things would have been better. That, or have more work done in the gameplay and mechanics department. The main story is the best draw to this game, by far. Honestly, if I played it again, I wouldn't bother spending the time recruiting every hero. That brings us to the final verdict of a 5.4. I actually had higher hopes because it's been a while since I played a JRPG. But alas, this is just an average experience. The base game sits at $50 on Steam. I would like it to be around 30, but support indie developers or whatever. If you like Suikoden type of games, this is probably for you. It's probably a 2 or 3 point higher score than what I came out with. But for the rest of us, settle in for an okay time. If the game was shorter, it'd be easier to recommend, but it's quite the time sink, and the average newcomer isn't going to finish it. With that said, it wouldn't be the worst first-time JRPG. Every important thing is pretty well tutorialized, and you won't get lost. I hope the devs continue to make games because you can see the passion they have, but some things need some work. So that's my take on this. Agree or disagree, leave a comment, subscribe if you want more rat reviews, and leave a like just cuz. Remember, if this video gets at least 100 views, I'll make a in-depth, concise tier list of all 120 heroes in the game. Otherwise, if you want to see some full playthroughs, the VOD channel will be below, along with the Twitch channel. And finally, to the devs, if you're watching this, I'm sure I would enjoy your next project more. Keep up the work, and I do appreciate the effort you pour into this game. But until next time, Rat Boys out.